Hello all, B.L. Carter here, affectionately known as Miss B, here with some more of our autoimmune and thyroid series. This one is going to focus primarily on those with hypothyroidism, that's an underactive thyroid, and it could be for various reasons. It's more generic. I didn't focus on any one particular condition, but I just wanted to share with you really quickly before we get into the meat of hypothyroidism and the various symptoms. Do you see this slide here that I have? And it shows the disease clusters. So modern scientists, modern medicine is very clearly aware, and they're finally starting to make the link and realize that these autoimmunes tend to run in clusters. So if you have one, oftentimes you will wind up developing one of the others or multiple of the others, or quite a few of them. Actually, if I'm looking at this list, there is two that I've been three I've been officially diagnosed with and showing symptoms of some of the others. And so as I go back and forth to my doctors, they're constantly checking for some of the others. And so that's just something I want you guys to be aware of. If you're dealing with these conditions, to be mindful that your conditions will sometimes you'll have symptoms from different conditions, so it may be hard for them to diagnose, or they might diagnose one and then another one later, or not another one, and etc. So you just have to be mindful. Okay? Now, disclaimer. I'm not a doctor, and this information is not to replace your medical team. Thus, I won't give specific treatments. In another video, I will detail my personal experience. But what I often recommend people to do, no matter what, is to eat as healthy as you can, and to keep your body detoxed and cleansed as much as possible, and stay away from as much medicine as you can. And the rest of it is definitely a case-by-case situation. Nobody's body is the same. Nobody's genetics, nobody's environmental situation is the same. So there's not one particular method to resolve these autoimmune conditions. And it just has to be, a case-by-case situation. But this is a guide for you, and I encourage you to use it as a tool to help you research, and do more research. I don't give stats. Stats can be subjective and misleading. Obviously, who's doing the study and for what purpose are they doing it? And I've personally seen where, stats are manipulated to give the impression that the surveyor wants to give. So I don't share stats unless I was a part of collecting the data and analyzing it in some way, or I'm pretty comfortable that the source is reliable and the information is accurate. Something else I wanted to share: stats are based on lab reports, which largely based on environmental factors. We know environmental factors vary by location. So, for example, the climate or the environment in New York is very different from California. So my labs in New York may be considered normal because of all of the other people in New York have labs in that range. And if I get on a plane and fly to California and do labs, if the people in that area have a different normal range, then I would be considered abnormal. So you have doctors on two different ends of the country looking at the same labs within labs taken within a 12-24 hour period, and if the numbers say the exact same, they're given conflicting information. So I don't necessarily give stats because, again, that's just another variable, and it's a major variable that people tend to overlook. So But let's jump right on in. And again, this is meant to just give you some of the symptoms that people with hypothyroid issues deal with on a regular basis. We oftentimes, if we can't see a person's medical challenges, and because I don't like to use the word disability, but if we can't see their medical challenges, then we assume they're fine. We assume everything's okay, and we expect them to produce as the person who's 100% all the time. But oftentimes, there are people with hidden medical challenges, and they're unable to produce 100%. So, as far as energy levels go, a person with a hypothyroid situation, no matter how they obtained it, either through Hashimoto's, just a temporary, let's say hormonal fluctuation during pregnancy, or hormonal fluctuation taking some other medicines or some other health condition, or if they're post-RAI, hypothyroid, whatever the reason, they could very well deal with these symptoms, especially if it's not treated. So they're going to have less stamina and energy than others. They fatigue out. Just, once you do something, it takes no time to knock you out. Oftentimes feeling weak, just no energy, no physical ability to do. There's often a need to take naps. Nodding off, I've never nodded off driving, but I've personally experienced, get up, you got all kinds of energy, take a shower, get dressed, go through all of whatever you got to go through to get ready to get out. You get out, and within 30 minutes of being out, dog tired and ready to go lay down and take a nap. Long recovery periods after any activity, that just goes with the territory. If you're, and again, this is if your stuff is untreated or undertreated. And it takes a period of time to see all of these things, but then once you do see them, you're able to act on them. Arms feeling like dead weight after activity, legs get tired quick, like, riding the bicycle. I have a stationary bicycle that I just work on in the home, just to keep my legs from, because I used to have good strong leg muscles and stuff, and I don't want to lose that. So I do still do my home bicycle as well as my treadmill, just to keep my legs in shape. I don't want them all flabby and all those muscles back there hanging down and stuff. So, but they do get tired. And so what I do is I'll do it for a few minutes and I stop. And I'll go back to it and I'll stop. And just do it in little bits and pieces. But it is difficult to exercise because you get tired really, really quickly. It's like you almost have no energy. Slow into a snail's pace when walking up a slight grade. Difficulty getting through a work day. Going to bed earlier than normal. Anybody can tell you, yeah, I'm the queen of that. I'll be in the middle of a party and I'll go find me a bed and lay down. And before you know it, everyone's looking for me and I'm fast asleep somewhere. But you're just exhausted in all areas. Physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. And again, this is for those who are in an untreated or undertreated hypothyroid situation. It takes a while to identify all the symptoms, and then trying to get back to your optimal level, you will have some level of these different symptoms. You may not have them all. You may have most of them. You might have 2 or 3 of them. And the more optimal you get your thyroid levels back to, the more a lot of these symptoms will go away. And as we go through this entire thing, I've experienced, I would say, 99% of these symptoms at some point or another in this, 15-year journey. And then sleep and rest. Now, I've not developed this, but some others within the thyroid community have developed sleep apnea. And it can also be associated with the low cortisol, of having continued hypo. When you've been hypo for an extended period of time, that can develop. And then sometimes you're just so exhausted, you know, at nighttime that you're wired. You can't sleep because you're just too tired. You sleep harder or longer than normal. Dark circles under the eyes, that's a definite. No matter how much you do sleep or don't sleep, those circles are going to be there. That goes along with the territory. A lot of yawning, just being more tired as the day goes on. As I said just before, you start out with energy and it can drain really quickly, or sometimes you can get to, I remember when I was coming from, I guess you could say, the bottom and working my way back up to better health, I found myself pushing, okay, how long can I go in between my naps? And my goal was to go, okay, I need to make an hour, and then I need to make 2 hours, and then I need to be doing something active for that first hour, and then doing something active for the 2 hours. So just building. And as I go through my daily routine, the level of energy that I have is one way that I'm easily able to determine if, you know, my levels are okay, or if I'm slipping down or going up too high or whatever it is. So, and if you're dealing with this over a period of time, you'll learn to monitor those things as well. You have trouble studying, and then this is something it's hard to describe, and those of us in the thyroid community, we call it air hunger. And it feels like you're breathing, but it's like the air is not going in. It's going in, but it just doesn't feel like it. It feels like you need more and more and more. Under mood and emotions, you develop chronic low-grade depression, or depending on how hypo you are, how bad your levels are, it can move into major depression. There's a bit of sadness. You cry more easily, and I don't know if that's well, that's information from the community. I experienced that, but you know, I've always been what they call a bag of water. You give me a sad story and I'm already in tears. So I don't know if that's hypo or that's something I've been forever and a day, but you can be moody and crabby, irritable, especially, again, when the levels are off, when they're not treated properly. Once it's treated, that moodiness subsides significantly. Some have had to take antidepressants or anti-anxiety medicines because the anxiety is high. It's like you're feeling you're on edge all the time. There have been times where there were suicidal thoughts, hypersensitive, just worrisome, just constantly worried. It's like you can't rest, you can't settle. There's been a complete lack of motivation. If you're a female, and these conditions tend to target women more so than men, but the emotional stuff with the PMS tend to be a little worse than normal. And then your patience, it's like you don't have a whole lot of patience. So I wrote here intolerant of others, and that might not have been the best way to put it, because you are tolerant of them, you're just not tolerant for very long. And then bipolar-like symptoms, it's almost, the mood swings are just back and forth. And depending on how fast they swing, which, you know, the pendulum swings back and forth, that kind of gives you an idea of how bad, for another word, for lack of a better word, your levels are, how far out of whack your levels are. So, metabolism, you feel cold. Hands and feet, the extremities will stay freezing cold. I used to have coworkers talk about me in the office. It's 70 degrees, 80 degrees outside. The air is blowing, and I'm sitting there with a space heater, because my feet would get cold and touch my hands and they would be cold. You would have sweaty or clammy palms, need for extra layers of clothing, feeling anxiety, I said that already, and being caused by the excess adrenaline is due to hypo. but it can also be related to adrenal issues. And I definitely want you to pay attention to that. If you're dealing with thyroid problems, definitely pay attention to your adrenals. Most doctors will not check your adrenals, but oftentimes they are a culprit behind the thyroid, if you will. They are oftentimes, that kid who throws the rock and hides his hand. The adrenals can be that kid who's throwing the rock and hiding his hand, and the thyroid is the one that gets blamed for the issues when it was really the adrenal. So definitely keep that in mind. Cholesterol increase, that was a shocker for me because I'd always maintained a pretty decent lifestyle and healthy eating. And so when my cholesterol started going up, I became concerned because it was always very low. And so to be told on one of my visits, well, your cholesterol's up, and like, no, but that goes along with the territory. At the same time, you're feeling cold, you're feeling hot. So it's like you fluctuate. Almost as if you have, what you call it during menopause, hot flashes. It's almost like hot flashes. And, people will laugh at you and they will assume, I've had a doctor assume I was going through menopause. I think I was I was long before the normal menopause age. And that was a good 15 years ago. And, doctor just told me flat out it's menopause, and that was it. And in my groups, because I do belong to a couple different thyroid support groups, just so that I can get information, several women have expressed the same thing. They get told, oh, it's menopause, it's anxiety, it's depression, and they're dismissed. Well, the purpose of me doing this is so that you don't allow yourself to be dismissed. Know the symptoms. And if you're seeing a whole bunch of these symptoms in your life, then you get to your doctor. And if he's not listening to you, you get your coat, get your purse, and go find the next doctor. And you keep going until you have someone that's going to listen to you and run the appropriate tests and help you to get to a level that you need to be on. Do never allow a doctor to treat you according to the labs only. A good endocrinologist or naturopath or osteopath or a holistic provider will treat you according to your symptoms and your labs. So that's definitely something you want to look for, someone that's going to treat based on symptoms and labs. And then your body temperature tends to decrease some. You don't perspire as much as others, and you tend to gain weight because your metabolism has decreased. So, just things to be mindful for. One thing I did to counter that was I have clothing in different ranges. I have clothing from a size 6 up to a size 10. And I think I may even have some 12s. So depending on where I am on my thyroid spectrum, I'm always able to pull out something decent to wear. I didn't always know to do that, but, it grew into it. And so I learned to, be ready to roll at any time. The thyroid itself, if you're hypo, as you can see here in this picture, it can be swollen. You can develop a goiter. Your throat can actually be sore. It can be painful, same as sore, but you can have difficulty swallowing. Swallowing could be painful as well. And I didn't put it on here, but I did a separate video. The hoarseness, your voice tends to get more hoarse and deepen. And it's not necessarily becoming for women, and most people don't understand it. But, it's kind of one of those things that go along with it, especially if you wind up developing the goiter or nodules or something else on that throat. Okay, stomach, digestion, and foods. Acid reflux. Doctors will tell you you've got too much acid, so, they're going to try to give you antacids. Well, you really don't have too much acid. You really don't have enough acid. Your acid is really low. But they're going to say it's too much acid, and they'll, try to give you, what is it, Prevacid or Pepsid AC or one of those antacids. I remember going to my gastroenterologist the first time I saw him, and then, oh no, it was the second time, because we ran some tests, and he said something about that, and I just said, okay. And he handed me a little prescription for, I think, Prevacid or something along those lines. Okay, thank you. I'll walk right on out. I didn't even bother to fill the prescription because I had already talked to several people in the group, and I knew that this was a potential. And so when I saw it to check off my list, I knew, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. And so I expected kind of that I was going to be told that, and that I was going to be given an acid instead of going back to the original problem. So you can save yourself some money from getting prescriptions that you really don't need, prescriptions that are really going to mask the symptoms and not deal with your issue. Now this was a biggie. Food sitting in your stomach a long time and feeling bloated, because the actual process, the motility, the peristalsis is slowed down. So when you eat, your food does not process as quickly. It takes forever, and you feel bloated. Sometimes it will even hurt. I've had, it used to be where when I ate, that area would just hurt so to where I just wouldn't even, I got to the point where I was eating like a baby. Very small amounts. And let that get through, then I'd eat a little bit more. And actually that wound up working for me for the longest. I think for about a 3-4 year period, I could only eat maybe, I guess what's equivalent to a can of tuna, a couple crackers, and drink a small cup of water or juice at a time. And then over the years, I just remember being so happy of being able to eat to sit down and eat a meal at one time. That was just like a big accomplishment. You tend to crave sweets more than usual. And so be careful with the sweets. Make sure you keep fruit available, so you're eating good sweets as opposed to the sugars, the honey buns and the Twinkies and the cookies and whatever else sweet. You don't want to do those. If you keep some fruit around, might even be a good idea to keep some prunes, because at the same time that you're getting a little bit of sweet, you're also getting a flush of anything that's hanging around in there that shouldn't be hanging around. That'll help go ahead and flush your bowels on out. Because just like this food is taking forever to process and get through, the waste is collecting up, and it takes a while to get through as well. Difficulty eating in the morning. That was something that I struggled with for sure. And I got to where I didn't have any breakfast at all. I ate the first time around 9 or 10. Having a poor appetite or no appetite at all goes along with the territory. I already said reduced motility. Extreme hunger. It's now at nighttime. It's like, it's like you're starving, as if you had not eaten in years. And then the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and that's as a result of the peristalsis slowing down, so your food is not processing as fast, and so bacteria can grow in your small intestine a lot quicker and amass up a lot faster. So that's why it's definitely important to do your detoxes until you're able to stabilize your thyroid levels, because you just don't want that extra bacteria, the gases that are coming up, etc. You don't want to deal with that. Nutrients. And this is something that actually I'll detail a little bit more when I do my personal story of my journey through this. But poor absorption, which means you can eat all the good foods, you can take all the multivitamins, you can do everything right, but if your body is not absorbing it into the cells at the molecular and cellular level, then it's not being absorbed. You're actually not getting it. iron levels are low. Your B12, or actually all of the B vitamins, levels will be low. The vitamin D level is going to be low. And the one reason why I recommend to anyone a good multivitamin or some variation of, because some in the Caribbean there's a particular thing, or I don't want to call names of stuff, but there's a particular supplement that's recommended no matter what your circumstances are. And so my stepmom swears by it, and she kind of, that's like a multivitamin to her, you know. But your multivitamin, you definitely want to make sure it has the D or D3 really, a B complex and iron. And now your vitamin D is actually made in your body. It's synthesized at night when you sleep. But it's based on your sunlight exposure. So if you're not getting sun, then your body is not making the vitamin D like it needs to. And that will lead to depression. It will lead to a whole lot of other stuff that, you know, we won't get into, but it can lead to a whole lot of stuff, including the cancers. So you definitely want to get your sun exposure, so that, you know, you have a higher chance of your body developing the D3, or synthesizing the D3 like it needs to, because that's very critical, especially for melanated people, to sustain life, really. Okay, cardiovascular, and this actually is going to be very long, so I'm going to stop maybe around 35 minutes and do a second half, just because it's a lot of information to take in, and this way this will allow you to be able to digest the first half, see what applies and doesn't apply, and then work with the second half. But under the cardiovascular category, you may develop heart disease. You probably will. Again, this is in a hypo state, continued hypo state, and even once your levels are brought back to where they need to be, they need to sustain. You have to sustain them there in order to keep these symptoms away. However, if there is damage done, it's quite possible that that damage will not be corrected. It just won't become worse. So there's palpitations, diagnosed with AFib, fluid retention to the point of congestive heart failure, a high heart rate, plaque buildup in the arteries. Now, the plaque buildup in the arteries and the diagnosis of AFib, both of those have the potential of developing blood clots, having heart failure, or stroke, all those fatal events, if you will. Yeah. So hypothyroidism can be fatal, just like hyperthyroidism. And for the longest, the medical community was dismissing it like it's no big deal. You just take a pill, you keep going, you get up, go to work, just do life. Well, it's not that simple. If it's not maintained, you can't do life, because when you get through this video and the next one, you'll see there are so many things preventing you from doing life, and then there's the potential of some serious complications. But blood pressure increasing, I already mentioned the cholesterol increasing. However, with the blood pressure, and this is vertigo is what they call this, when you stand up, your blood pressure drops tremendously, like dangerously low. And so you become a fall risk. And yeah, I'll be transparent. I wound up fracturing a foot because I stood up too fast before I knew that this was one of the issues. And when it was all said and done, I was in the emergency room and I was hobbling out on crutches. So you definitely want to watch that. If you find that these things are going on, you definitely want to watch it. Okay, waste, bladder, and intestine. And you see I have a diagram here of the system from the mouth all the way down to the anus. So this would follow your entire food process all the way through your system, as well as showing various organs. But your stools may be hard, they may be small and round, you may be constipated, or you may have diarrhea. It will fluctuate. The candida, that's the yeast overgrowth. And women, we already know about this. We just have to be careful to make sure our levels stay on point anyway. But this is just an extra thing to try to knock your levels off. So you have to pay attention to that. Colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, painful bladder and urination, bladder spasms. And then there's that urgency of like feeling like you gotta go. And then when you do go, it might not be as much, or you might not go as frequently, but when you do have to go, you've got to go. There's no time to wait. It's kind of like that 2-year-old, 3-year-old is potty training. When they got to go, they got to go. So we're at 30 minutes on this one. I'm going to go ahead and stop this one here. The second half should be about just as long. But yeah, these are the symptoms that people who have hypothyroidism for whatever reason, whether it's Hashimoto's, that's autoimmune, whether it's post-nuclear medicine as a result of being hyper, whether it's a result of the adrenal conditions or some other condition that's causing you to be hypo. If your hypo is not being treated well, if your levels are off, and I mean off for your body, not off for the doctors, what the doctors say is normal, but off for you, then these are some of the symptoms you're going to deal with. And if you can see these symptoms and you continue to see these symptoms, you got to do some things different. You may need to change medicines. Oftentimes it takes that. When I get into my personal journey, I will talk about some of the medicines that I took and the changes that I made and how I improved or got worse based on different medicines. But, so yeah, I want you to have a look at that. If you're dealing with it, do a checklist. Print it out if you have to. Check off. Take it to your doctor. This is what I'm dealing with. And again, if the doctor is not willing to look at your symptoms, regardless of what the lab tests say, if they're not willing to try something different based on you continuing to be symptomatic, get your purse, get your coat, your hat, and get yourself out of there. And don't go back. So, that being the case, I will see you in part 2. Take care.